Good evening and welcome to Greater Somerville for August 2nd, 2011. I'm Joe Lynch. My guest tonight is a candidate for Ward 7 Alderman in the city of Somerville. She is a business consultant, active in the Teal Square neighborhood, a volunteer with the Somerville Public School System, a past president of the Somerville Community Corporation, and is a co-founder of a local small business here in the city. She's a graduate of St. Michael's College and Suffolk University, a longtime resident of the Teal Square neighborhood. She and her family make their home there, and it is my pleasure to welcome for her first visit, Katjana Ballantyne, candidate for Alderman in Ward 7 in the city of Somerville. And welcome to you.
Thank you.
On a beautiful summer's night. A lot of people don't like thunderstorms, but I think when my garden looks as parched as it's looked, I welcome that thunderstorm.
No, I totally agree with you. It stopped me from watering tonight. I was really happy. It looked pretty dry.
But let's put it this way. We're here in Union Square, and we know Union Square does not like big deluges coming down.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
If you feel a little water on the feet, though, don't let it bother you. So, we were talking before the show, and we were talking about something that was announced yesterday by, and I know people are going to be asking you about it during your campaign, so let's get it right up front. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts has announced that they are delaying the deadline for the extension of the Green Line to 2018. Doesn't sit well with a lot of people. A lot of people who have been advocating for the Green Line extension. The first date was 2012, then it got moved up to 2014, then up to 2015. Now we're up to 2018. What do you think your the potential constituents in Ward 7 are going to think of that?
I think that they would ask the aldermen to really push and advocate for them, and really talk with DOT and the MBTA to make sure it doesn't get pushed aside.
Yeah.
I mean, you really. At least that's the conversation I'm starting to hear. People want the Green Line. One of the issues for Ward 7 is to have the Green Line go out to Route 16. And we have to keep that on track. So they're going to want some really strong advocating to make sure that stays on track. And what was it, just a few months ago, they were saying that was going to be in the 215 to 220 slot? And it's only a couple months later, and we don't even know where that's going to be slotted in.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of folks in the city, we forget about poor little North Somerville that sits up there on the Arlington line right at Mystic Valley Parkway. But we have a lot of business that's up in that section. Right. And the Cummings real estate empire owns a lot of businesses up there. There's a big, is the gym still up in that complex? So
that's Medford, but as I understand, it's still there. The U-Haul is a building is Somerville, but the building right next to it is actually Medford.
Is Medford.
Yeah.
Is Medford.
Yeah.
But our neighborhoods, neighborhoods in Ward 7 abut that whole piece of Medford, the North Somerville area. So yeah, we do have a stake in it on whether or not it goes, right through Medford and then lands in that little piece of Somerville up there. So, yeah, I don't think the folks in Arlington, North Somerville, Medford, especially Somerville. I mean, the Somerville folks that I've spoken to since the announcement have basically said a lot of stuff that probably is not, we can't air on television, but nobody is pleased with it. Nobody is pleased. I wanted to put that up front.
Yeah, and I'm a strong advocate for, the Green Line. I've talked at the public hearing meetings. I've been to Mass DOT over the years, so I'd like to see that it stays on track. Yeah.
All right, well, let's move back. Great advocate for the Somerville public school systems. Is there a reason for that?
Well, my daughters are in the public school, so I've been a volunteer in the public school systems, also for scale. But my oldest daughter is going to be entering the high school come September, and she's very excited about that. And my younger daughter is going to be entering the Katjana school. So, and that'll be our first experience with the Katjana school. But I've heard wonderful and rave reviews from parents over the years about the Katjana school. So The schools, as I talk to new families, or I should, when I say new families, I mean children that are or parents that are first-time parents, and you meet them at the playground. It is, take a look at the schools before you make any decisions on what you're going to do. I think it's more
one of the critical decisions. Yeah,
a self-promotion that we really need to. The grass seems greener on the other side sometimes, but Somerville really does an amazing job.
And it's a critical decision for young families or families that are relocating to the area to look at the education system and say, yeah, they have a pretty good education system.
Right.
It's in the middle of the pack or it's at the top of the pack.
Right.
Yeah. It is a critical importance when people look at our community and say, I'd like to live there.
Yeah. It's funny, I just met someone today who lives in Charlestown. She's a mom of two little boys, 3.5 and 18 months. And she said, I'm always in Union Square and in Somerville. My husband and I really want to move. Would you... I mean, it was wonderful. I said, move to Somerville. And she asked me about the schools. And, I explained what our experiences have been and that, different schools have different communities. And the biggest straw is that Somerville allows parents choice to select a school, which other communities don't. So you can try to feel comfortable, in whatever school setting it is, whether it's, the East Somerville, whether it's the Kennedy, whether it's the Healy School. You can find a community that, you feel works for you and your family. And I told her to move to Somerville.
It's interesting you're talking about the school system. Your neck of the woods only has one left, right?
Yes,
is the West Somerville
School.
Yeah. So that leads me into a question talking about Ward 7 issues.
Sure.
And I've asked one of the other candidates who's been on the show, disposition of the old Powder House Community School.
Yeah.
What should the city do?
Can I frame this a little broadly in terms of...
Now you have to remember, I know you're a politician. You got 28 minutes, so
okay.
choose your words.
I'll choose. So in terms of Ward 7, and in my campaign, is framed under 3 broad issues, and that is open, accessible government, affordability, and jobs. And all the issues that are affecting Ward 7 can fall into that. And if you look from sort of top to bottom, the major issues are keeping the Green Line on track, management of the DCR parklands, the cleanup actually of the Alewife Brook, local development in Teal Square, vacancy of storefronts in Teal Square, the reuse of the Powder House School, and also the learning lab between Cameron and Elmwood, relationships with Tufts. And in terms of, answering you in terms of, so when you come back to that, it's just, it's really important with open, accessible government that we involve the public. And with the Powder House School, the public has to be involved. The development. There's also going to be a development at Wayside, which is on the corner of Broadway and North Street, which is next to the park that's on North Street. And so we know these buildings are there. We need to be proactive. Start engaging the community, because this is an engaged and informed community. And if you make changes, as the proposal was to make changes on the rezoning of the Powder House School, the community was just like, wait.
Yeah.
We want to sort of decide what goes there, or have an understanding, have a community discussion about what will go there before we decide, okay, let's rezone it for the highest density.
There were multiple meetings that were held, was it last year and the year before?
Yeah. So it's been a couple of meetings. There have been focus groups so the community moved forward on their own and set up their own meetings, and which was attended by over 100 people. And then so the city said, well, let's rethink how we're going to work with the community. And so they reached out and asked people to be part of a focus group. And there's about 60 people that are part of it in terms of city planners and then community residents.
So any consensus forming at this point?
No. As the last that I know of it, and that's talking with people who are part of the focus group, is that It's at the idea stages, and some of the ideas have been parks, low density, maybe townhouse style combination, low density townhouse on the footprint of the school, and also maybe on the where they the basketball courts out, the blacktop,
the open space that's out there.
Remain as open
space.
But
get rid of the asphalt and make it more of a parkland.
And it's only been in the idea stages. As far as I know, there hasn't been a resolution that says, okay, let's propose this and let's get community input.
So nobody's advocating for the complete sale of the parcel and just dump it off the city rolls and...
No, actually, what they've been talking about is sort of the most compromise, I guess you could say, is it's a combination of open space and density. Who's going to do the open space and who's going to do the low-rise development? I'm not exactly sure if it'll be owned by one developer or whether the parcels would be split in two.
Up, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not sure that that discussion, that much detail has been thought about. It's still just at the idea stage.
Yeah, we've faced several issues of the same nature in Ward 5, and anytime you talk about the city getting rid of surplus property, the community always wants to have a voice in what happens in their neighborhoods. I would just say that at this point in time, there's going to be increased pressure on neighborhood groups and on advocates for the sale of surplus city property because of the economic times that we're in. So the easiest way for the city and the mayor and the legislative body to realize how they can keep taxes down is to sell some of this surplus property.
Okay. I've heard lots of discussion. We should have never sold the Tab building.
Yep. Yeah.
And so it's really easy to get rid of it. If we need space in the future, it's going to cost the city money. Sure. It's going to cost the city more money for that. So if it slows down the process right now, and I'm not necessarily 100% clear on all the numbers, the financial numbers, because not all the numbers have been given on, say, how much it would cost to demolish. Well, there was one set, but there was a lot of discussion about, is that really a true, accurate number based on the economic times?
You're doing well so far. You use the word discussion rather than arguments. You're doing great on this political speak. So let's get into a couple of other things that, your bio talks about you being part of SCC, Somerville Community Corporation. And they have been operating here in the city for...
over 40 years.
40 years now.
42, 43, going on 43.
And for the folks at home, Somerville Community Corporation is a private not-for-profit organization that develops and builds and advocates for affordable housing here in the city, amongst other things. But their primary focus at this point is affordable housing.
Yeah, but a big part of their budget is also organizing. They get revenue from the developers' fees from the development, but a big piece is also the organizing work that they've done. So I've been on the board for almost 8 years, and they've done, under the leadership of Danny LeBlanc. They have just really strengthened their organization, which started out with grants from local. We are now in state organizations. We're also getting national grants. We've really been put on the map in terms of having conversations about the Green Line coming in and what it's going to do to the community, and the affordability, which is one of my issues. How do you deal with that? And at least it's starting the conversation on a community level.
Yeah, I was told not to use this term anymore, and I'm gonna have to use it because I can't remember what I was told to use. When I lived in Boston, there was something similar happening. We refer to it as gentrification.
Okay.
Gentrification is where you have less than affluent folks who live in a neighborhood, and then all of a sudden development comes in. And development can take the form of a high-rise hotel, or it take the form of new high-end restaurants,
Right.
or redeveloped business district like
Right.
the Union Square or Maguna Square, or a transportation system like
Right.
the Green Line. What that does is it puts economic pressure on the least wealthy.
Right.
And it forces them out of the community that they're in.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, we've faced it for a long time now here,
Yeah.
you know, in Somerville.
Yeah.
Because it's a double-edged sword. You know, the sexier the mayor makes the city, the more people want to come in and live here, and then you're forcing some of the low-income folks out. So it's a conundrum that we have.
It is. So, you know, what can a city and a community do in terms of trying to keep it affordable? I mean, some of the tools at the city level is rezoning. You know, in order to, I mean, the city of Somerville, as we all know, is dependent on residential tax base to fund its services and state aid primarily, and then that lost $30 million is, you know, fees and permits. But if we can focus on trying to push where it's already been zoned for the commercial, I mean, really push and try to get that revenue in, then it gives more money to the city. It affects the residents and the taxes that they pay. It comes into the schools, and it would then, you know, how the city manages is other, but it would be up to the community to say, well, let's think of other ways
Right.
of rezoning different areas. It would give that cash inflow that we need.
Well, you know, I've been an advocate, and I've said it before, you know, I think we really need to take a very hard look in a very short period of time, very quickly. We need to take a hard look at hiking the 12.5% set aside for large development. I've always advocated that it's just not cutting it. You know, don't do it after we're all developed.
Right.
Do it now.
Right.
You know, take it up in stages. Take it to 15%. Maybe in 5 years you take it to 18%. But these developers are going to make oodles of cash off of the sexiness of Somerville. We need to get something back.
So it's up to us as the aldermen and as the residents and
You
the
bet.
community to just really push that conversation and make sure that conversation is being had.
Ward 7 issues. We have the economic downturn. I can tell you it's hit all the small commercial districts. How's
yeah.
Teal Square faring?
Well, Teal Square, there's 2 new businesses in Teal Square. There's the iPhones business, which is in the former Rudy Upholstery small
Yep,
storefronts.
yeah.
There's
Left-hand side of Broadway.
going
Yep.
towards Route 16. And then on the right-hand side, across from Teal Square, is Collabs, which
Okay.
is an artist who's lived around Ward 7 for at least 11 years, who finally was able to move her business out of her house there.
Vacancy rate.
The vacancy rate, so I can tell you what the vacancies are. So
There you
it's
go.
on 1188 Broadway. That's that development across from Bremis Realty. The new
That's
four-story.
that new four-story building.
So the condo never sold, the business condo, and they're trying to lease it. There's 2 storefronts at the Rudy's Upholstery. There is. I think that's.
Yeah, I did
Yeah,
not
there's a
see
little bit of
whole
office
lot.
at North Street, and sometimes there's. Well, no, it's occupied now,
Yeah.
but there's been a little bit of turnover in 1 or 2 of the other storefronts.
Okay. How about relationship with Tufts? How's that going? It's quiet this time of year.
Yeah, it's quiet this time of year. I mean, for the residents that live up near Tufts University, it can be a challenge. Yeah, it affects their quality of life, and having door knocked during the time when the students, while I was up there and the students were there and then they left. And it is a very different feel. Like I live in the Teal Square area, but just walking up, like Curtis, walking up 3 streets from, my street or 2 streets, you notice the difference. So a lot of the residents have taken the initiative themselves to introduce themselves to the students, and they say that that's been a big help. Like as soon as the students come in, like in the first day, they give them a welcome packet. They explain to them who's living in the neighborhood. So it's not just that they're moving in and they have no idea who's there.
I asked this question of one of your opponents that I've always advocated that in the past, the relationship between Tufts University and the city of Somerville has been handled primarily by the Ward 7 alderman and the mayor. Do you think we would do better if we had some type of a town gown council?
I think that that's a really interesting idea. I think what would be a really good idea is why don't we see what other communities have done, sort of get the best practices and be part of it, because I'm sure the residents that live up there would like to be a part of something. So they know it's not just one person. If they have a strong issue, they want to know that they have direct contact with people.
The reason I ask, I have one of my nieces is a grad student, so she's slightly older than the median age up at Tufts, but she happens to live right in one of the hot spots on Bromfield Road. So
it's Ward 6.
It's Ward 6, I think she's actively looking to get off of Bromfield Road because she said, it's amazing. She didn't go to school here in the Boston area. She went to school in Vermont, but she said it's amazing. Just that 4 or 5 year difference, the age difference between the freshman and sophomore who come in. Let's move to some of the other stuff that Ward 7 is facing. So we've got transportation issues with the Green Line hopefully going up into the area, the relationship with Tufts, the future disposition of the Powder House School, the economic livelihood of Teal Square, residential. The residents, you've been door knocking for a while now. What are the residents saying?
The residents are saying similar things to the themes, and that's why I did in my 3 broad themes: open and accessible government. They want to know that that someone is there for them, that it's accessible, that it's not just waiting until there's an issue, that there's an alderman that comes to them and asks them questions. Affordability, living here is getting expensive. I heard a lot about real estate taxes and the cost of it. I've not heard so much about the rents. I've door knocked with renters. I've heard a lot of people say they love Somerville. They just love Somerville.
How about those parking tickets, Katjana? How about those fees, fines, and parking tickets?
The fees, fines, you do hear people talk about the fees and the fines. I can't say that it's been a predominant theme. They are talking about, it's like, what's the big picture? Let's talk about the big picture, because they said they understand that the fees are trying to fill a budget gap for the services. So unless we think of the big picture in terms of how to get more revenue into the city,
we have to give up services.
We have to give up services, or we have to we have to pay higher fees. And pay higher taxes.
It's interesting because when you said you're not hearing that much, I listen a lot to elected officials and candidates and neighborhood groups. And it's interesting that over the period of time, since a lot of the parking fees were hiked, and they just recently went up again on some of the fees and fines, and there wasn't that public outcry over the increase. And here's what I think, it's my take. And the mayor was here on the show, and I said the same thing to him. When you institute something like that, and you go from 0 to 60, it's a jolt. You go from 0 to 60 in a car, it's a jolt. If you gradually go up, the initial jerk is over with very quickly. I'm not calling anybody a jerk. I'm saying that initial acceleration is over with very quickly, and I think that's what's happened here in the city, is that it was kind of a shock to people who had, my term, bad behavior. And then all of a sudden they started to get tickets for parking in front of fire hydrants. Their cars were getting towed because they were in fire lanes, and they were getting tickets for overstaying or not feeding the meters. Surprise.
Yeah.
You know, so I think they're kind of over that. And the mayor likes to use the word compliance.
Yeah.
I like to use the word behavior change. They might not like complying, but they've changed their behavior.
Yeah.
So it's surprising to hear you say it, because I've, over the past year to 2 years, I haven't heard that anger that was out there.
So you're surprised to hear it because it's in agreement with that you're not hearing the anger as much.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I'm glad it's not just where I live, it's up where you are too.
No,
so.
I mean, you know, a lot of people have driveways. I mean, the tenants, or I should say renters, have talked about it's expensive. But you know, I hear a lot about open, accessible, be open and accessible.
Yeah.
Communicate me in many different ways, and the affordability in terms of real estate and jobs.
So we got a couple of minutes to talk about open and accessible. When people say to you, "We want the government to be open and accessible," I mean, I get the whole thing about they want an alderman who communicates with them rather than sitting back like the benevolent banker of old, you know, come on in for a loan. So here's the question I have. Of the 3 candidates that we have up in 7, you have a website.
Yes.
I know that Joan Whitney Puglia has one. Does Alderman Train have a website?
I haven't looked for one. I can't answer that.
Because I assume that that's one way that candidates have to stay in touch with their constituents: Facebook, social media sites, door knocking maybe, or community events on off-election years.
Yeah.
You know, all those.
Yeah.
So that's what they're talking about.
Right.
Newsletters.
Right.
I mean,
Right. No, they're very.
You know,
yes, those are the kinds
that's
of things
what they're looking for.
They're looking. They want to know that you care about. They're just reaching out. It's sort of like it's very personal human interaction.
It's like having a family member who calls you, even though they live in Arizona. They might call you.
Yeah.
I don't have any family members in Arizona, but let's get into. You've made the decision to run against an incumbent.
Yes.
So the question is why?
Why? I'm committed to my community. I want to give back. And I think that with a combination of my business skills and my community development skills, that I can make a difference for Ward 7. Somerville has been good to my family. We've really enjoyed it. And, you know, when I go to community meetings, it's like the people like to be engaged here. There's so many. I mean, some of the first public meetings, I was just sort of awed with some of the brain talent
we do
around
have a
here.
lot of talent.
Yeah,
it
a lot
always
of brain
surprises
tabs.
people.
But it's the next step to being more committed. I've been here almost 20 years, and we're here for the long haul.
How are they going to stay in touch with you during the campaign? You have a primary coming up on September 13th.
Yeah.
So that's next month.
Yes.
Next month. 3 candidates.
Yeah.
Incumbent, 2 challenges.
Yeah.
Primary date, September 13th. When do they have to register by in order to vote?
The 24th of August.
24th of August. If you live in Ward 7, if you're new or you haven't voted in a long time, call the Election Commission. He will let you know how. I want to thank Katjana Ballantyne. Your website.
My website is katjana.org, and my telephone number is 857-928-6852.
And best wishes for September 13th primary. And if you move on, we'll try to have you back before the November general election.
Sounds great.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Very nice. Katjana Ballantyne running for Ward 7 Alderman. As always, folks, stay safe, stay informed. We'll see you after Labor Day. Thanks for joining us. Good night.